Good afternoon to you. Mark's out of HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Monday, October 28th, 2019. We are almost at the end of the month and almost at the end of the hurricane season. And as such, we won't be seeing too much more activity, especially down here in the deep tropics, using the orange today to kind of represent Halloween, which is coming up, I guess. That's actually an accident. I didn't mean for it to be orange, but that's fine. We can change that back to yellow. There we go. Nothing against Halloween, but anyway. Down in the deep tropics, not going to have as much activity down there. Instead, the focus, and it's going to be rather limited, believe me, even though we just had Pablo up here, which we'll talk about more in a moment. We will have these other storm systems, these large extratropical storms that occlude out, where they transform and they develop within the larger circulation, cyclonic circulation, a little baby hurricane. And that's what we had over the weekend with Pablo. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. First of all, down here in the Gulf of Mexico, we will be watching this area. Just in my mind, a very small chance, not just my mind, but meteorologically speaking, it's there. Very small chance of some development with this. And when I say development, a little bit better organization. It's a mass of convection over warm water, and it's generally headed up towards the Gulf Coast, where you had to deal with Olga several days ago, and that was a little bit of a surprising system, somewhat of an overachiever. I do not foresee this feature doing the same, but it's worth monitoring. I doubt that the National Hurricane Center will need to outline it, but they might. You never know. The models are not bullish on it at all, but it's just a large disturbance down there. It'll affect the oil industry, petrochemical industry, etc., and it may bring some showers and thunderstorms up to the northern Gulf Coast as the week progresses. Just something to watch. Again, we don't have to have hurricanes to have problems. We saw that with Olga a few days ago, Imelda back in September, and so forth. And even these little disturbances that pop up, these areas of vorticity, low-level vorticity, convergence, air coming together at the surface, and boom, you get these showers and thunderstorms that fester, and you have to keep an eye on them because they are there. Now, back to this system, very large cyclonic storm system up over the North Atlantic. This is the remnants of Pablo up here. These are embedded inside of a very cold air mass way up in the northern latitudes. The air up at the 200 millibar level and higher, 30, 40,000 feet up, is minus 50, minus 60 Celsius, very cold air. And sometimes that cold air can reach closer down to the surface. And when it does so, the ability of the atmosphere to lift and become unstable, conditionally unstable, increases. And so you can get these little baby hurricanes that form, and they are hurricanes. They are convectively active. They have a warmer core, and they're born within a very cold environment around them, not traditional like we see down here in the deep tropics. Like where Dorian formed as an example, Michael last year down here, Harvey over here back in 2017, Irma coming off Africa and doing what it did, Maria. Those are all your classic tropical cyclones, born in a warm atmosphere, a warm environment with cold air way up in the upper atmosphere. And you have to have cold air somewhere in the mix. If the atmosphere was uniformly warm, then you wouldn't have weather. Everything would be in balance. It's just like the Star Wars saga, the balance between good and evil, the light and the dark. Well, that exists on our planet, not just in a galaxy far, far away. We call it weather, where you have cold air, warm air, and all of that is generated by the sun, warming the planet, warming the ground, warming the oceans. And that heat, or lack of it, and cold and the storminess between the two, that's what we call our sensible weather, weather that we can feel and sense with our eyes, our ears, and our skin, and so forth. And here you go, large extratropical system. And it just might, try to, as the Hurricane Center was outlining, develop into a more subtropical type system, even though it's way, way, way up in the far northern latitudes, north of 40 degrees latitude, which is about right through here, and the remnants of Pablo up here even north of 45. Now, these are not unprecedented. We've had these happen before. Sandy Delgado, a meteorologist down in Florida, tweeted this earlier, and you can see that since, 1969, 70, 72, this is just before I was born in 69, there's a system there. In fact, let's just click on this and expand it, shall we? There we go. And yes, we had satellites back in the 60s. Not before that, though, not weather satellites, so just keep that in mind. Every once in a while, somebody will email me and ask if there's a satellite picture of Hurricane Hazel from 1954. And the answer is no. But anyway, I digress. So we've had these before, these tiny little hurricanes way out in the far northeastern part of the Atlantic Basin. And look, they all have these tight little cores, going back through the 80s, and then finally 05, that's Vince. 2009 we had one, and then of course this year with Pablo. So not completely out of the realm of possibility. Look, we got 9 of them that we can go back in history and see, and there they are. Elsewhere, nothing going on in the tropics from the National Hurricane Center's point of view. Maybe this area gets outlined at some point, but I doubt it. It's just, again, something I wanted to point out, just keeping you aware. Speaking of aware, we will be focusing more and more on lower 48 weather over the coming days and weeks, especially weeks as we get towards winter. And yes, I will be going out and setting up equipment. I don't want to call it chasing. You don't chase a winter storm, but I'll be covering them, covering the winter storms, both from an awareness perspective with these updates, and then when the budget and other constraints, money is a constraint. I can't do everything. I don't have the Bruce Wayne Foundation. We have the Patreon, and that's great, but we don't have millions of dollars, like the old adage there of, I talk about jokingly, an endowment of some kind like the Bruce Wayne Foundation. But nevertheless, yes, I will be heading out into winter storms, primarily those that affect the East Coast over here especially. Hopefully some lake effect snow events this year, some stuff out in the Great Plains with some big winter storms. Maybe something up in the high Sierra, we'll see. But the main thing is to keep you weather aware as to what's going on, and of course the wind and the wildfire risk out here in California. Just the stuff of nightmares. You get that strong offshore flow from high pressure that sets up over the Great Basin and beyond. And that strong offshore flow, they call it the Diablo wind, and you know why. That strong offshore flow, the air comes down out of the mountains off the Sierra, it sinks, it compresses. Warm air, when it compresses and warms, it dries out, the dew points are low, and boom, you've got this very, very tender setup for fires to start in California. And fire weather is weather. So, it doesn't matter if the sparks are created by mankind. I mean, it does matter, but it's still weather. We have to pay attention to this. Other things that we like to keep track of, see this little green area? Coastal flood advisory. Maybe because of the new moon coming up, we will see some coastal flooding now that the sea levels have come up just ever so slightly over the past 100 years. No, that's not something that's imagined. No, it's not a hoax. It's real. We're getting more coastal flooding when the sun is out, not just from hurricanes. We can talk about mankind's influence on the weather maybe some other day, maybe as part of a blog post or a podcast someday in the future, not today. The bottom line, when you see the green along the coast, and I'll click on it just to show you, that's typically because of some kind of a coastal flooding issue, and you can see it right there, coastal flood statement. So it's just a flood statement, one level below an advisory. The bottom line, I want you hurricane ready and weather aware, because as I say, if you're ready for hurricanes, you're ready for just about anything. The good news is not much percolating out there at all to worry about hurricane-wise, and so we will focus on lower 48 weather more, and eventually we will get one of these big-time winter storms in the east or in the central United States, and I'll be out there covering it personally, freezing my butt off for you. But you know what? It gives us a chance to continue to use the technology that we use to track hurricanes when they make landfall, tropical storms, whatever. I cover those too, not just hurricane-centric here. And that's coming. I think before the end of the month of November, I'll find myself out there setting up equipment somewhere in the lower 48 for a mid-latitude storm that's not from the tropics. We shall see. All right, that is it from me for today. Pretty short, but that's good. That means there's not much to talk about. And in the world of weather, as exciting as it can be when there is something to talk about, oftentimes it's much better to just have things quiet. I think we can all agree with that. Because when they do get crazy and out of control, well, you know how that can go too. Have a great rest of your Monday. I'll be around throughout the week posting updates from time to time. Thanks as always for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you later in the week.